I'm bringing you an inspiring survivor story where a survivor chose to fight not just for themselves, but for someone who was unable to fight at all. A true act of selflessness of a 10-year-old girl who had just witnessed most of her family being killed. A child who was unable to shut down or to process how her life had just forever changed and how critically injured she herself was. She continued to fight. And because of that, she and her baby brother survived. You are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke Makenna. In today's case, I am bringing you yet another one of those stories that just makes you so inspired and proud of humanity and should be the focus of the cases rather than the people doing the horrible things, the people who are victimized by the horrible people, the people who survive and fight against them. And again, this is a 10-year-old girl who did this, and those kind of cases, we did one a while back where she was 10 years old as well. There's a whole playlist down below, but those are just insane to me that a child so young who doesn't necessarily know what to do fought because that was the only option. I believe that she deserves her story to be told. I also want to thank our sponsor, Paired. Paired is on a mission to help relationships and make them the happiest and healthiest that they can be. You can improve communication, stay connected, and deepen intimacy, all by showing up in small yet meaningful ways. You and your partner get to answer fun questions as well as do quizzes and games no matter what stage of the relationship that you're in. Paired is backed by relationship therapists and experts that put everything together for you and make sure you are in the best kind of relationship. We all know just how scary toxic relationships can be, and sometimes they're hard to even notice yourself. But with Paired, it allows you to truly and deeply get to know your partner. For my viewers, Paired is giving 25% off the premium membership with my link down below to maintain a healthy connection with your partner. So check it out down below. Now let's get back to the story. So it was 2021 in Texas, and the Lagway Carhe family lived in Houston. Now this was 29-year-old Donavia Lagway and her husband, 35-year-old Gregory Carhe. There were 4 children at the home. Who was a 10-year-old girl who was unnamed, an 8-year-old son who was unnamed, and a 6-year-old named Harmony, as well as a 1-year-old baby boy who was also unnamed. Donavia was also pregnant with her 5th child and had just found out, and they lived at an apartment complex at 12101 Fondren Road, and Donavia and Gregory had been together for more than a decade at this point. Now, we don't know much about the family's background or the kids or even how the parents were and their personalities. That's just not something, unfortunately, that has been revealed much. And we will kind of get into why there's not a ton of information a little bit later. But on June 30th of 2021, the Houston police were called to their residence. And there had been reports of a shooting, and the police had arrived around 10:35 p.m. and they came upon a crime scene with bodies as well as shell casings from the gun. Now, 3 people were already deceased. They were DOA. There was no way that first responders could help them, and they appeared to be almost lined up on the couch. However, police would also see another little girl who was wounded but conscious. She was also holding a baby who appeared to be alive as well. This little girl had watched her family being murdered, and she had been left in that house with those bodies for the past 15 minutes until police had arrived. She, however, was the entire reason that the police were even there, because even though the gunshots had rang out, nobody really knew where it was coming from or what had occurred. But this courageous girl, this 10-year-old girl, had FaceTimed her grandmother moments after her family was shot at and asked for help. She allegedly told her grandma over the phone, "Granny, someone came in and shot me, my mama, and my dad, and my sister, and they're dead." Now, while the grandma couldn't get there fast enough, she was calling the police to have them go there, and the 10-year-old would then be rushed to the hospital due to her own injuries, which appeared to be a gunshot wound to the arm. She was said to be in critical condition. She needed some surgeries, and the 1-year-old baby was also assessed as well, and he was believed to be completely fine. He didn't appear to be shot, though they didn't know if he had any other trauma from that evening. But surveillance cameras and footage from the area were all obtained around this apartment complex, this neighborhood, and the detectives were offering a $5,000 reward on the case immediately. There were no signs of forced entry into this apartment, which made police believe that maybe the victims knew their killer or had possibly even let them in. But first responders were said to be extremely emotional. It's very common when there are child victims involved that the first responders, the police, they're not equipped to see things like that, and it never ever gets better no matter how many times they have to. And they were just in need of a lot of healing after that. They had talked to neighbors who had said that they had heard the gunshots, but they could not tell in this apartment complex exactly where they were coming from to call the police. And one had also seen a Jeep that was speeding away from the crime scene after the gunshots. The 3 deceased victims were later identified as Donavia, Gregory, and their 6-year-old daughter, Harmony. Now, the 10-year-old who had survived but was being rushed to the hospital, she wasn't in the best condition and investigators weren't sure she was going to survive. But she had mentioned that a black man had forced his way into their home and shot her family wearing a medical mask, which around this time was around the COVID time when everybody was wearing masks. So I'm assuming that is what she meant by that. And she also believed he was around his 20s. She would bravely explain that this man came to the door and that her father, Gregory, opened it and he was holding the 1-year-old baby, and that the man was trying to get inside and they were telling him, you have the wrong house. And that's when he got really mad and he ended up grabbing the baby by the hair and throwing him over on the couch out of Gregory's arms. He was demanding money, and at this point he began to shoot. The 10-year-old would then inform the adults of what she had done to survive, and this would make most grown adults cry. Because this 10-year-old who had been shot in the arm during the shooting, she didn't scream, she didn't cry. She laid there and pretended to be dead. And when the shooter turned around and left, she got up with all of her power in her body, went over to the door, locked it so that the shooter couldn't come back and finish the job. And then she ran over to her 1-year-old brother and picked him up in her arms to make sure he was safe. She then called for help, and because of this, she had not only saved herself, but also her baby brother. In those few moments, this 10-year-old baby herself had lost her mother, her father, and her sister, and she was under no fantasy or impression that they were going to be okay, that they were still alive. She had checked on them, and she knew that they were gone. She told her grandmother that, and she knew that someone still needed to be there for that baby. Thankfully, their 8-year-old brother was not home at the time. He was not at the residence at all, and so he had survived the entire thing at another place. And as police searched for the killer, the 10-year-old survivor was actually undergoing multiple surgeries to heal her. The assistant district attorney would make a statement saying that there are many adults out there who could not have done what she did and have the mental capacity at that point to ask for help. The remaining family members immediately went to the apartment and they got all of their belongings out, and they moved the children out of the house, out of that crime scene.
But I want to show you what's happening right now. Right now, family is loading this huge U-Haul van with the belongings of this family from that apartment, and off into the distance you can see balloons that have been placed on the balcony of that apartment in honor of the victims. We spoke with relatives who say no one should ever have to go through anything like this, especially children.
So why? That's what I don't understand. When I got the phone call, I just was in disbelief. And then she told me that they had both passed, and I was saying that couldn't be true. She waited until he left and pretended that she was dead. And then when he left, she locked the door, grabbed her little brother, called her grandmother.
And for something to go on like that, that's not common, especially like being close to your house like that. So I think we're just gonna find somewhere else to go.
My kids play with them. Like, that's too close to my house. That's way too close. I really hope they catch whoever did it, because that's just really heartless.
And the children's grandmother, who is Manda, took them into her care. She's told everyone who will listen that her 10-year-old grandbaby is a hero. And during the funerals that would occur shortly after, the 8-year-old boy, who wasn't even there at the time, he was heard saying, "I just want my mom. I want to see my mom." and he would say that every time they tried to close her casket. It wouldn't take a very long time to make an arrest in this case, though, because the very next day, it was July 1st of 2022, and a man was arrested by the Houston police. And this was actually on a family violence charge, a domestic charge. However, police had a sinking suspicion that this man could be involved in the murders that had happened the day prior. 28-year-old Xavier Dominic Davis was arrested and charged with 3 counts of capital murder and 1 count of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. And at that point, his bond was set at $1 million. 5 days later, investigators would uncover yet another crime committed by Xavier Davis. You see, the car that had been seen by neighbors fleeing the scene, that Jeep Compass, was actually a stolen vehicle. That day, an hour before the murders, Xavier had gone to Larkwood and held a man at gunpoint until he got the car away from him and ended up using this Jeep Compass as his getaway car. He was then charged with the robbery as well. However, that same day, Xavier's bond was completely revoked until all of the charges could be combined, and the judge said he would be held at the Harris County Detention Center without bond.
I think that based on the severity of the charges and based on the facts in this case, I was anticipating that he would be held at no bond and expected that from Judge Warren. And I believe ultimately he made the right decision.
In capital cases, the judge can have a hearing. If the state wants to hold him at no bond, he would normally be entitled to a bond. Big can of worms that you get into, and whether or not the judge can hold somebody without a bond and make a decision early on whether or not they think there's proof evident that he's likely to get the death penalty.
Citing a risk to the community's safety if he were to make the bond. Now, Xavier Davis was found to have a lengthy criminal record prior to all of this, with even some pending cases. You see, back in 2014, 7 years prior, he was convicted of felony aggravated robbery, and then just 24 days before the murders, on June 7th of 2021, Xavier was charged with the aggravated assault of a family member due to pointing a silver revolver at his girlfriend. He was threatening to shoot her because he believed she was cheating on him. However, investigators did not believe that in the case of the murders of this mother, father, and 6-year-old girl, that he was the sole suspect. It took months of searching through the evidence, but it would uncover that they were right in their suspicions because Xavier Davis was not the only one who would have made these murders occur. There were 8 months with no real motive for the murders. Nobody knew other than maybe money, since he was allegedly demanding money at the front door, but nobody knew why they would have all been killed in order to get the money that they allegedly didn't have. But then cell phone records were linking him to a woman who was also being linked to the murders. She turned out to be the motive. This was a 28-year-old woman named Alexis Williams, and she was said to be friends with Xavier since childhood. And Alexis was arrested on March 3rd of 2022, so 8 months after the murders had occurred, because investigators believed that Alexis had told Xavier that the victims had thousands of dollars at their home and that he would just need to go in and kill them, and then he could get all of that money. It could all be his. It was believed that for Xavier, the motive was greed, but for Alexis, it was revenge. You see, investigators believe that Alexis knew the victim, who was the mother, Donavia, that the two had actually had an affair, and they had met around 2017 or 2018 and began dating. That Alexis knew where Donavia lived because she had allegedly spent the night over at her apartment a few times. However, around this time, Donavia decided that she actually wanted to stop the affair and be with her husband. And so she ended it. It was said to end quite badly. And this was about a week before the murders.
Alexis Williams, if that's the consequence of dating this defendant, nobody in Harris County is safe. She was not allegedly the gunman, although she coordinated the entire event, it appears.
I didn't fully understand what you said.
You have no bond in any of the 3 capital murders.
Cell phone records had showed that Alexis and Xavier had very long text messages during the day of the murders. And then, around the exact time when they were shot, there was a FaceTime call made between Alexis and Xavier. And without it recording, we don't really know exactly what occurred on this call, but it was theorized that Xavier had called Alexis either during the murders to allow her to watch or afterwards to let her see that they were, in fact, dead. It was even possible that Alexis had asked to speak to the victims, before they were murdered. Investigators knew that Xavier had been in that apartment for a certain amount of time. Though they didn't specify how many exact minutes, they said that most of the time he was in there, he was on that FaceTime call with Alexis. Before Xavier stole that Jeep and then went and murdered this family, he was actually with Alexis at a strip club where she had allegedly placed the thought inside of his head. Alexis Williams was charged with 3 counts of capital murder and 1 count of aggravated assault, and she too received no bond and was barred from contacting any of the victims' family members. Now, there is a reason why they had to do that, which we will get into, but the prosecutor was very concerned about Alexis Williams, saying it's even more disturbing to think that she didn't want to be there in person, but she certainly wanted to see the actual commission of the offense and the aftermath. Xavier Davis and Alexis Williams could face life in prison or even a possible death sentence. However, their cases have yet to go to court as more evidence is being compiled. It hasn't been that long. But the family of the victims, they really struggled with paying for the funerals that were so sudden and came out of nowhere. And it was said that Donavia had just gotten a life insurance policy, but it occurred so suddenly that the policy was too new to actually cover anything. The Pruitt and Pruitt Mortuary began to take donations actually for the funeral, and I don't think that that donation is still available to call in or to donate. I think it's pretty much been covered at this point, but if I do find any others, or if you find any other fundraisers, GoFundMe's, anything, please leave them down below. But horrifically enough, even though the funerals ended up occurring, they were paid for, it turned out that it was not this peaceful gathering because Alexis Williams had attended. This was before she was ever implicated in this crime, and the person that they believed to be the mastermind of these murders would go and see the victims.
It apparently went down that the defendant attended the funeral service of these victims that she helped to kill.
No one knew that the possible killer or the possible person who plotted the murders were among the grieving family members. The local community, including a motorcycle club called the Street Lords, have been fundraising to build a trust fund for the kids as well as to get them into counseling. It is so beautiful and heartwarming to see how much the community has gathered around these children, especially in the family that are now having to raise them out of nowhere. The children who've had their parents taken away far too soon and also right in front of their eyes.
Several local motorcycle clubs actually put this all together. I want to give you a look. You can see that it's quite a large turnout, and all of this is to benefit the family that has lost so much. They specifically put this benefit together to support the surviving children, are setting up scholarships to make sure they have the support they need now and years down the road.
This is a family that a lot of us on the bike community know, so it's like we done adopted a family. We're gonna always be there. This is just the beginning.
The beginning, right. It's wonderful. I think it's wonderful. I mean, I really, thank everyone, for coming out here and supporting us, at this time of grieving. But I mean, I love it.
I love hearing that counseling is something that is being thought of for these kids, because even though this 10-year-old was extremely brave and it didn't seem to affect her, she is deeply traumatized on the inside.
This incredible young lady was able to get up, despite being gravely wounded, care for her 1-year-old baby brother who was still in the apartment.
And the names of the surviving children have actually never been revealed or released to the public, and I'm not sure that they ever will, since they are such young children. And the 10-year-old is said to be now 11, 12 years old. All of her other siblings are younger. There may be an identity reveal during the trials, maybe if the 10-year-old or, the 10-year-old at the time would need to go up and testify. But I feel like even without her name, this little hero deserves to be recognized. I'm sending so much compassion and healing to this entire family. They have had their lives flipped upside down, and while the adults and the children are grieving, they are also having to take care of one another. They're having to accommodate for these orphaned children, all because of a jealous woman who is malicious enough to want to watch the murder plot that she created, allegedly.
Whoever came to do this heinous crime meant to do this. He didn't want to leave no witness. He didn't shoot the 1-year-old because he can't talk. I hope who done this pay for this, because they did not deserve this.
I'm so thankful that that baby was not shot up, but he was thrown across the room by his hair. Just like with the 8-year-old who wasn't there but still is feeling the effects of having their parents be taken too soon. And I just hope that these children do not believe that they are to blame for this, or that they could have prevented this or stopped this in any way. These were just children. and the monsters were to blame. These children did nothing wrong. Their parents did not leave them. They were brutally taken from them. And I hope that that is something that they are constantly reminded of. They didn't leave them behind. They didn't want to leave. They didn't want to say goodbye. They didn't get to say goodbye. They wanted to be a part of the children's lives. And they would have if they could have. Now, do you believe that Xavier and Alexis should get the same sentences, although one was said to execute the murders and the other was said to be the mastermind? I think in this case, they are equally to blame. They wouldn't have done this without each other, and I know that often when we talk about masterminds in crime, it almost feels like a very manipulative person who puts a spell on these accomplices, where they feel like they have to do it. They wouldn't have done it any other way, other than being manipulated. However, in this case, although Xavier didn't have the same motive, he still decided to kill a family over money that he was promised for his own personal gain. I'll be very interested to watch this case as it goes to trial and see exactly who has confessed to what and how their stories differ. I want to know if either is acting like a victim at all, because the only thing that has been revealed thus far that either have said is when Alexis was taken to court and she told a judge she didn't understand what the judge meant when he gave her no bond, meaning she couldn't get out of jail. But other than that, there have been no official statements made by Alexis or Xavier that have been released to the public as far as I could find. I still wanted to tell you this case because at the end of the day, those survivors and those victims deserve to be known and deserve to be talked about and completely surrounded by love. I'd love to keep you updated on this case. Make sure you are subscribed and coming back every single week to make sure you are all caught up. And please let me know if you know any more recent cases that you would like me to cover. I was just absolutely baffled when I heard about this case and the fact that it's not very well known, even though this 10-year-old girl did survive and also saved her brother simultaneously and also called for help as well. And also was able to give a description the best she could and a reenactment of what had occurred, even though she was brutally injured and had to undergo multiple surgeries. She is someone who is absolutely a hero. And I wish her the best in life. I truly do. I hope that she knows that it is going to be tough trying to heal and trying to not always be the strong person that she had to be that day. But it's worth it. It's worth it to survive. It's worth it to continue living and to do great with your life and to be surrounded by love and to live and honor those that you have lost. So Parrot is giving 25% off the premium membership with my link down below to maintain a healthy connection with your partner. So check it out down below. Don't forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces.